Welcome to the Heartwork podcast, where we delve into stories, struggles, and triumphs of entrepreneurship, leadership, and personal growth. I'm Dr. Sarah.
And I'm Dr. Marisa. We're here to guide practitioners, entrepreneurs, leaders, and those just navigating the complexities of life on a journey of discovery that explores the dance between passion and strategy, heart and hustle.
With candid conversations, insightful interviews, and plenty of laughs, get ready to uncover how leading with heart can transform your business and life. Let's dive in.
Well, welcome back to another episode of the Heartwork podcast. We are so excited. I am thrilled because I get to introduce you to somebody that is near and dear to my heart. You are going to meet Kendyl Campbell. Used to be Campbell Chambers when I first met her, y'all. So a lot of life has evolved for this beautiful woman. She has been a part of my business company now for over 6 years. And I can't even tell you how much this woman has grown. I truly, Kendyl, I remember the first time I met you. Well, for one, you were a patient, but then I got to actually sit across from you at a coffee shop, had a kind of this informal interview. Literally, like after 2 questions, I was like, okay, I got to hire this girl. Like, it was so wild. So such a fun, beautiful beginning of our story. And then now to be able to see you truly running this chief culture, like running this experience role in our office. To me, she is basically my integrator. She basically cultivates culture within our practice and the experience within our practice, along with then making sure that that gets to our team and then gets to the doctor side of things in our office as well. So we are so excited to have you. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you. It's such an honor.
I know. And it's fun too, because Marisa's had a chance to be able to be a part of your story really early on as well. So it's a fun full circle moment for all of us. So
true.
As we get started, just talk to us a little bit about what's your journey been like as you started with us and really expanded over the course of really your career as within a chiropractic office within a business. And was there any pivotal moment that you remember that was like, wow, this was a big moment for me?
Yes. Well, you would imagine there was tons of pivotal moments since there's been 6 years of my life at Freedom. But honestly, the beginning of Freedom, it just sort of kickstarted a whole new chapter of my life. I had just graduated out of college, was in that limbo season of I don't really know what I want to do because I have this degree in counseling, but I never wanted to go be a counselor. So that was really smart. And I was actually applying for 6 months, going through interviews for a social work position before Freedom came and basically asked me, would you even be interested in interviewing with us? And to me, working at a chiropractic office was so off the wall, but I honestly was in this point where I didn't know. I feel like I had exhausted my opportunities in this other world. And this seemed like this cool new thing that I would love to be a part of. And since I was already a practice member, I already understood that this place is awesome. And I had spoken to my friends that I would totally work at this place if I could, just in passing. And so to start in 2017 as a practice member, which that was also a God moment. And it was very comical in how I even came to Freedom, because I hurt my neck, saw you guys on Instagram, walked into a coffee shop, and you guys were all literally in a room together. And I remember seeing Dr. Sarah, and I walked up to you and I was like, I need to come see you. But you've been on my phone and you're here. And you were like, yeah, you do. I said, I can't turn my neck right now. So it was such a bizarre, hysterical moment. But that's honestly, that's what I love about life. And I love about my life is you just walk in and it's meant to be. A lot of my seasons of life that have been amazing have been just that organic, natural flow. And so, yeah, that's how I found Freedom. Then you guys approached me about a job when I had just been sitting for 6 months struggling to then, here I am 6 years down the road, and I've gotten to grow every single year. When I was looking at what I did every single year, I was adding on a new layer. And all it was just integrating different parts of me that I've always loved people. That's why I went to school for counseling. But all I want to do is just expand on that. And I learned like I'm really creative and really good at problem solving, and, great at like meeting people where they're at. And that allowed me to be a trainer and to then become like a project manager and an office manager. And then now I'm like focusing 100% on my niche, which is the culture and the like experience of the office. So that is like my journey. And there have been, like I said, pivotal moments. I was thinking about what were those moments. And to me, it comes down when you question, like, is this something that I need to like keep pursuing? Because while I was like growing at Freedom and enjoying it, we were also going through so many like transitions, and it was hard and I didn't love it at all. I'm a person that I want to naturally grab on when some like change is happening and say like, how do we make it not change though? Like, what can we do to problem solve that? And I remember in 2020, which, it was weird for so many people, but we at that point were also talking about what it would look like to expand an office in the middle of what was, a pandemic. And before that, we were down in staff, and we had just hired 4 new people. I had just like sort of put all of my energy out into doing, making sure our just team would function and do what they could do. And then I'm having my boss say, no, I want to have this big dream and go expand. And that was where I sort of just like threw up my hands and said, like, heck no, I'm not doing that. I don't want to be a part of that. And because that was just the biggest change at that point. And I realized like I was in a lot of burnout, but my burnout to me, and it's different, I know, for each person, but it really comes down to whenever you're just trying to like hold everything together and thinking that it's all on you. And so then you just gotten yourself just down in like this hole basically of doing too much. And I didn't know how to like lean on my team because I had just been operating out of like a survival mode. And sometimes that's required in seasons, but I didn't have to anymore. I had this amazing team in front of me and I didn't have to do that. And so that was like a really pivotal moment for me.
I love that because oftentimes it is those like tough, dark, like in the grit moments that really shine a light on pieces of ourselves that haven't necessarily been exposed, or maybe haven't really been exposed as vastly. And so we have either like 2 choices. Like you said, you can either shy away and like you resisted so much against change, except we all know that like the one thing that always is constant is the fact that it's never constant, right? It is always changing. But from the sounds of it, and obviously from the fact that you are still there at Freedom and now continue to instill culture and help to encourage other people to move with the tides and know themselves more authentically to participate in a positive culture, you had to walk into that place of resistance and actually forge through and understand more about yourself, where that was coming from, why you had that burnout, and then where you could go forward. And how cool is it now that you actually get to help guide others through that same journey for themselves. But sometimes we just don't even know what that could look like. And how can we effectively share that with others if we don't have those experiences ourselves?
Yeah, exactly.
Love that.
I think it's neat because just hearing it, I'm obviously your boss, and obviously we dance in this together, and it's been so fun regardless. But I think a lot of people that if they're listening to this podcast, or like, and just in general, if you were an employer or an employee or vice versa, wherever you're listening to this from, you can sometimes get really paralyzed from having honest conversations with people above you. And I know you've had to navigate this now as a leader with those underneath you, right? The same space of like, now you're leading and you're having this authority in a way that's just a different capacity when you first started. And so I've had to learn what it's like to be an employer that can hear and be there for those stuck moments where you just feel like, hey, this feels bigger than I am, or bigger than just where I am at this current moment. Doesn't mean you don't want to move in it, but to keep you from going from a place of complete resignation to move forward And again, to see where you are now is absolutely incredibly brilliant. And I've had to learn that versus just taking a complete like defensive stance and saying, well, if you're just not on board, then you need to get off the train, right? Type of a thing. So how have you navigated that? Because I know you've had to like completely go through your own journey of this place of being a CA, working close knit with a lot of people that were more of your peers, going from then a peer place to saying, okay, now I am a leader. I have this authority. And I know when I say like people, like it's different than being a people pleaser. She's a people person, y'all. Like you get around Kendyl, like there is so much joy. There's so much love. There's just so much like you just are sucked into her vortex in a way that is just contagious. And so I know you've had to navigate that, just being that people person. So share with us that journey a little bit.
Well, first off, you have to, when you start stepping more and more in like to a leader role, getting further away from like the noise and not just trying to make everyone happy in the office, but it always bringing it back to what is our, like, what's our culture? What's our core mission, our values? And that being like the peg that keeps you, you know, strong during like every single day task when people are just complaining about different things. I think when I started, growing into my leadership role, there was this immediate understanding that I don't have to feed off of every single thing that someone's telling me. If they're frustrated about something, if they are feeling a type of way, a lot of times it's instead of me, one, thinking like, oh, I've got to fix this, because I think that's a really big area in leadership that you want to keep everyone happy. And that has been something that I am constantly trying to navigate and figure out where is when they're saying something to me that it's something that they are just saying and that they need to, that they can process on their own, or rather, oh, this could be a really big like opportunity to instill culture, to bring them back to like the heart center of why they're disconnected, why they feel disconnected in their role at all. And just using each moment as an opportunity. I think that there are times where it's natural that I just sort of want to turn like the other cheek or turn my ear away from a lot of things that people are dealing with. And instead I could use it as an opportunity. So I'm not saying I do it every single time, but just learning how to navigate your inner voice when it comes to your, like, why you do what you do. And I think the more you're certain of that, the more you're able to like speak that into other people. And then it just becomes an overflow, and then it doesn't feel like you're reprimanding someone all the time. So that's been some ways I've had to navigate it personally in the day to day.
Yeah, for sure. Because especially when you're starting off and you are creating those relationships and you're bonding with your coworkers and you know more things about each other. And obviously, oftentimes in a business, like you are going to bond more with your peers in that business than you may bond with like a boss or a leader or a manager, for et cetera. And then you get called to go up into those roles. And now it's like you are not only holding space in the way that you used to bond with that person in a certain level, and maybe kind of chit chat back and forth or just connect. But now you're also holding them accountable in the day to day for things that they are responsible for or report to you for. And so it can be really hard to like figure out where that line is in general. And then on top of that, understanding that, yeah, everybody's human and like we all may have certain days. And for sure, like sometimes we just spin off something because we're just frustrated or we're blowing off steam. And as the leader, then you have to figure out and navigate, okay, is this something that's actually worth my energy and time? Is this something that this person's just having a day and they may need a space? So like, do I encourage them to take a moment? Is it something that they just needed to get off their chest and now they've moved on and it's completely behind them? Or could this be an opportunity where, especially if I'm noticing it from multiple people or from the same person over and over again, can we create an opportunity to, like you said, recenter back to the culture? But then again, at the end of the day, you're the one now that's navigating that and instilling that, not just from a friend standpoint where you can listen and kind of hold space for them, but you're holding space for them and also calling them up into level up into making sure that they're also honoring that team culture in that place first, so that your workplace can continue in positivity and with the mission at heart. So it's definitely challenging to figure that out. And it can change a lot of our perspective for our leaders and the people that we reported to, because now we're in that position and you understand the complexity that can come along with that.
Oh yeah. I think it's a natural instinct when someone, says something that they're, say it, for instance, it was me being like, wanting all this pushback on the future, like success of freedom, and being like, I don't know if I want to be a part of that. Me at certain times, if someone said that, I'd be like, well, then there's the door, and that isn't because there's a part of me that's very black and white where I'm like, you're either in or you're out. And I have learned too that I don't operate in that. Sometimes I've been in seasons where it's like 3 months, I'm just sitting on a question and you have to dance in that. And so being a leader, you also are having to decide when you know someone well enough that you want, that they're going to take the time and the effort, and even try to encourage them to create space to like, hey, ask some more questions about this before you say yes or no. And I think that is really important for me. Something that I feel like that my coach helped coach me through was to sort of create a system on how to handle conflict. And I'm not saying it's some rigid list, but it's basically saying hey, I'm noticing, you're not reaching your full potential here, and you're disconnecting from how you're influencing the heartbeat and the culture. And when you point out hey, these are these specific areas that I'm noticing, what do you think about that? And when you bring it back to someone's core being and their in their heart, and being calling them out of hey, I'm not noticing you be you, I tend to see the conversation go a different route rather than it be a time to fire someone, especially with the people we're hiring and where we've gotten to. They aren't people that just are there just to do a job. They're there to make an impact, or I wouldn't have hired them to begin with. And I think that's really important, is to know your people enough so that you can call them out and say, I know this isn't how you usually operate. This is why you started to be a part of Freedom in the first place, was because this is our beautiful culture. This is what it looks like. But you're halting that in some way. There's something stressing you to perform in that. And so just giving them that grace to figure it out and to answer, and to then come up with expectations together to move forward, is the best way I've found that I can navigate that in a way that is respectful of a person just having a bad day as well.
That's really cool. That's jumps down to one of our other questions that we had. I'm going to have you expand on that a little bit, because I think for a lot of people, and this is just as we've grown, as you just talked about, we've had to navigate that for personnel, especially as your team grows, right? As your team grows, your leadership reach expands too. It's not just me and you having a conversation anymore, because it's just you and me and this team. It's me to you. Now you're talking to the team, and then you have leaders that are now leading other team. And so talk to us a little bit about that, how that's expanded, what you've created, you said, it's basically a feedback loop to when somebody is not meeting the expectations that are there. What have you now done? Just give us some more detail of that. What have you now seen to be able to amplify that leadership for people in a setting where they want to basically bring up their leadership within their team, within their leaders, and all that? So
the biggest thing that I heard over the years of why people were not satisfied and at our job in different situations was there was a lack of communication when it came down just to the core expectations of a team member. So this past, year and a half that I've been really in this position, I've just been going back to what has not been said that that was really important to us, but the other person on the other side had no clue that that was important. So to begin with, I, with the team, created a list of team expectations that were, character qualities, but like that you need to be a teachable team member. You need to take ownership. You set up expectations that are very clear, that go along with the roles in your office and that are just important in the flow. And so every single time that I'm checking in with every team member, I'm able to go back to that list of expectations and say, hey, this is an area that is some like an area of necessary growth. And some of them are like in danger that if you aren't growing in this area, we're going to be having like a different conversation next time. And so when you are hired at Freedom, you already know what the expectations are. We set goals with you at the beginning. And then as we check in with you, those expectations are continuously brought up. We also have a culture that we speak into every single area of Freedom, and that has a list of our beliefs and our mission and our values. And that is being brought up regularly and we're trying to find ways of how that can be impactful in every area of our office. If you're just sitting at the front desk having a conversation with you, that you're utilizing that value. And so I think that communicating is the best way to be effective with everyone. And it gives you a basis of when things are going wrong, of how to just bring them back to center, and in a way that's very black and white. Because the biggest thing has been trying to take the emotions out of when people aren't meeting expectations, and having something clearly you can go back to and say, hey, you know what this was, you didn't meet that expectation. Let's make an agreement of how we're going to do that. Moving forward.
That's incredible, because even I've just recently had to navigate a situation where a team member and I had agreed on certain expectations, and then they weren't being met. And I offered a lot more space and flexibility for them to kind of self-navigate what that would look like. But it created this opportunity where they constantly felt like they were failing, not meeting expectations, disappointing me and the team, even though we would try and provide more opportunity. And I feel like perhaps my own personal lack of maybe checking in more than I should have, versus thinking that I just need to provide more space for this person to kind of navigate that. Instead, maybe I should have been more guided and hey, I've noticed that even though you agreed to this or said that this was going to be the outcome of this request or this ask, that has not been met. Instead of just kind of being hey, how is it going? Are we going to get there? Okay, you're going to get there next time. Okay, cool. We'll check in then. And I feel like that accumulation and snowball just led for more opportunity for them to feel more behind and less like they're contributing. And that just really broke down in that role very fast, to the point where it was the ultimate solution at the end of the day was just for that person to take a step back from the team entirely. So for sure, I feel like learning and figuring out how to hold space, but also hold accountability, and also check in a way that helps you navigate the gray, but create clarity in that space, so that there isn't a lack of communication or understanding on both parts. And you don't have to be afraid to literally show or metric, listen, this was something that we both agreed upon, and it's something that's not being accomplished. What do you think about that? Where do we go from here?
Right. Exactly. And I think a really important piece whenever you're setting expectations for people is to have a date, by an agreed upon date, that this change is going to be in effect. This is what it's going to look like, feel like, even when you're operating at 100% in this area of necessary growth. That form of accountability, I will tell you, that's a really hard thing to navigate, because you feel like you are pestering someone. But if two people agree to something and you didn't force it on them from the beginning, that's why it's a really important piece that y'all both say, this is what is needed in order for you to grow. You want them to sort of solve for themselves, because that is where it opens up the question of, do they even want to put in the work? And then they can let themselves leave if they're not willing to put in the work, but they have to choose that too. And I think that is an area I've had to grow in, because I'm quick to say, here's the problem, here's the solution, do it, and we're good to go. I don't want to have any other, I want to keep it clean and happy.
Yeah.
And it does not work that way. And that has been discouraging to me at different times too. And I'm like, crap, I feel like I failed that person. And so I owe them another opportunity because I didn't, follow through on my end. And so it is, and it is a back and forth, but I think that things to just always commit to is make sure it's a two-sided agreement, set a time that it's supposed to be like successfully, met by, and don't be afraid to pester or bring up things along the way, because at the end of the day, it's for the growth of the business, not to make that person happy. And that's really crucial that you prioritize that,
Yeah. I kind of have a follow-up to that. So like, how do you navigate that situation when perhaps you're seeing something within that person? So like, you drive and work with culture. So like, you literally sometimes are the person that reads between the sentences that they're saying to you, right? And sometimes when you do a lot of work on yourself personally, and you're growing in leadership and growing in understanding how to navigate and lead others and call them into their own like growth and development, when you're in front of someone and you can like hear between the words what they're really saying to you, but they either one, don't have the capacity to be fully honest with themselves yet because they don't know themselves, or then two, like you just know that they're blatantly coming to you because they want you to give them the solution versus just being honest about what it is that they're actually experiencing and need. How do you navigate that space and like recognizing that the person in front of you is human, and there are some things out of our control that can happen outside of the office that can very much influence them in the way they're presenting and navigating a situation or expectations in the office, while also making sure that like at the end of the day, your business needs to run and your team needs to have a certain culture, adhere to core values, and make sure that the movement is actually happening. Where do you go in that space?
To me, that is where, it's important to be honest with people and to not be afraid to say the hard things. I think, especially when it comes to business, you're doing everything for like keeping it not about a person specific, being like, this is for the growth of the business. Your influence is impacting it this way. How does that make you feel? And is there anything you can think of to do in your day-to-day life right now that could impact it in a different way? And sometimes it's good to help bring up options. I'm like, do you need to make an ask for something? Because I think a lot of times people are afraid to request anything. So it's really important as a leader to say, do you have any requests of me? How am I supposed to support you when you're going through this? Because I think people naturally, we just have mental blocks where we're like, this is the way we feel like it's only going to be. But no one ever offered me up another option or the willingness to do that. To me, the hardest part is watching someone when you say, what is it that you need? Like, I can tell this is like a struggle for you. And you're saying, I'm willing to like work with you if you would just be honest. And then they don't take you up on that. That is where I've really not known where to go, and will keep following up with them. And that's when I just have to bring it back. Well, even if you're not going to ask, sometimes I will tell them like, well, this is what I'm perceiving. This is what you're putting off. Do with that what you may. But at the end of the day, for the growth of the business, I need you to do this. Sometimes there's not a solution. Sometimes they're not going to put in the work. And that doesn't mean that they're a bad like team member, but you did your best as a leader to pour into them and to offer them that space. And it doesn't mean you can't do it again and again. And maybe there will be a time one day they finally do say, hey, this is what I need. So you are working with people also on their own journeys, and you want to just squeeze them sometimes and be like, you can do this, but it doesn't work that way. And just know, to me, that as a leader, I want everything to turn out perfect. I want anything I do to make an impact and to go a certain way. And I mean, perfectionism is the biggest thing I've been having to break for years and years and years and years and years. And like, to me, whenever I share with practice members all the time of like, healing is not linear. It's the same with anything. That's why life isn't supposed to be just this one like perfect little incline and then you make it, because then when you make it, you're like, well, what's the next thing? That's why you need it to not be linear, so you're not bored, one thing. But also for me, I don't need to look at things in that view of, well, that didn't create this perfect atmosphere, or that conversation didn't come out with the result that this person took ownership. They understood. We had this clear deadline. All these things didn't happen. The only thing I can do is look at it and say, did I make an impact? Is there a potential for growth? And even be like, you know what, that didn't go well, and be okay with that. Is the hardest thing in leadership, is just to like let those like things go, because I don't consider anything to be a failure unless I just stop trying 100%. And if you're like, all right, let's try and navigate this another way, then I think then you're going to see, you know, what you're hoping to reap in time. But it does take time, and it's not going to be effective overnight, like at all.
For sure. No. So for you personally, how much time and space eventually at the end of the day do you allow for that to still be navigated, especially if it's not reciprocal, no matter how many tries or avenues or solutions you're offering, or space that you give for that person to find it?
I think that it's been different person to person. A lot of times our conversations, people realize that it is their time to go. And then there have been times where we have had to like have a conversation that, like, I personally haven't been the one to have these conversations, but I know I've been a part of it, of the thought process a lot with Dr. Sarah. But there are going to be times where, yes, people realize the best thing for them is to leave, or sometimes you to be like, it's time for you to go. But the timeline on that, I would say it's just dependent on a situation. It could be a week. It could be a month. It could be 3 months, 6 months. It just depends on how big of an impact their situation is affecting like the practice. And you just have to like weigh it out. Is them being there is it taking away from the practice, or is it worse if they aren't there? And are you willing to work with them? You just have to like weigh out the difference.
Going back to the previous question that Kendyl had answered, just to clarify for some people too. So one of the things that we have put in, especially for timeline and time frame stuff, just for kind of overemphasizing arch of like, let's say somebody's not meeting expectations, or like hey, we definitely know that this is not meeting where we need it to be. We need this person to lead through and like turn on this potential, because we've seen some major things slip. And if they don't meet this thing, they could have a potential of losing their job if they don't reach that. That could be anywhere. When we have that, I mean, Kendall's had this conversation with somebody, a month later, that person has a potential of losing their job, so there is and then she's had check-ins with that person where it was weekly until that month. And if there wasn't a shift until that month, then that person would have been losing their position. There have been situations too, where we've done that same thing. It's a month. Okay, cool. We've met that expectations up to a month. Now we're going another 3 months for another check-in. And then we're going up until another 6 months. So just as long as you have basically a feedback loop is the biggest thing I think we've come to find is like, there has to be a rhythm to be able to have those conversational points and have understanding versus just like, hey, we're going to have this conversation. See you when you do the offense again type of a thing, like where you said like the snowball constantly just keeps going essentially. So,
yeah. And you as the leader get to decide what that feedback loop is. Mm-hmm. I've not found like the perfect, sequence, but I've done a lot of emailing. I check in on the people that are overseeing the staff members and I, say, hey, have you just been noticing any growths, any areas where people are following through on things that they've said, just to get feedback from people that aren't the person that I'm working with. That really helps because I don't see everything. And sometimes people want to cover up as well. So I think that's really beneficial as a leader to ask for others. And then also just sitting down, having a quick 5-minute conversation to say like, hey, how have you worked on your growth this week? What specifically have you done to move forward with something? And did you have any questions? And again, how can I support you? And doing that, I've done that consistently for 4 weeks with someone. And we always seem to see a really positive impact. And we always see what we're hoping to grow in, get met at that time period.
So going off of a little bit of all that, what would you say is one of the biggest thing that breaks down team culture?
I would say the first thing is people will start disconnecting from their influence in the office. So, everyone naturally starts to have things going on in their life and they just start looking at themselves more and more and not thinking, oh, what I do here, makes an impact. And I think that it comes down to they're not inputting like necessary things for themselves. They're not taking care of themselves. So you have to remind people like self-care is so important because it's going to impact your influence here and your why. And then a lot of times like apathy then sort of comes out of all of that. And that to me is like where the breaking point happens that really starts to pull your culture apart and pull people apart, and unnecessary mistakes and drama starts to, run its course.
Yeah. Those are it's just tough. Like there's so many facets to it, right? Like culture really needs to be very intentionally driven or it can break down very fast. And we've talked about this in previous episodes, but like you can either like direct culture or culture will end up like it will become a result of what's just already happening if you're not leading it and directing it. And so what do you think is like the secret sauce to really helping to encourage positive team culture and like help that thrive? Especially like for me, I navigate a team of like 5, right? Mm-hmm. So like I'm very intergrained with like the day to day and knowing my team in a much grander scale than like with you and Dr. Sarah. You guys are navigating a team of like 9 or 10 people at this point. And so there's so many more personal influences. So how do you continue to help cultivate what is that space of a like thriving, booming company culture?
So whenever I was, named chief culture officer and experience officer, that felt like a weighty title because I took on a lot of my, whenever I get like scared, I tend to go into mode where like my pride comes up, where I'm like my ego comes up, and I think, oh my gosh, everything is dependent on me. I hear culture and I'm like, I am culture. Mm-hmm. I hold everything to like this whole place. If it's not doing well in culture, then it's my fault. Like I know that sounds crazy, but I dealt with that because of just it felt like a weighty thing. So I went and looked up what even is culture, like, and what makes up culture. And it is your belief system. It's your values. It's your mission. And I know this one's like a funny one, but it's like even the symbols. It's what you display that says, hey, this is our culture. And whenever I saw that, we at Freedom were really making a point to come up with a specific mission statement, a list of values that we want to uphold, and also a list of beliefs that we have. If, two chiropractors don't agree on like chiropractic and how it operates, then there's a massive hang up in your culture. If your people aren't, things that matter to us, if you're not making someone feel safe on the team to be able to share something, well, then you're not hitting our core values. So what I'm saying is what we created is the basis of who our company is. Now we can then provide a basis to know when things are getting rocky. So to me, the secret sauce is one, knowing what your culture is. You need to know your beliefs, your missions, values, your symbols, and you need to set up systems to help you keep accountability. And that for me is creating the team expectations list that I share. We have an honor and awareness manual that says this is how you should just respect and honor one another in the day-to-day flow of the office. This is how you do it in an exam room. This is how you would honor your team in this capacity. And just getting very clear and specific on what you want culture to look like, and communicate that, and then communicate it regularly. So that can be in your weekly team huddles, team emails, team trainings. And I think that is a really, really important piece to create a really thriving culture. And just remember that culture is the heart, and it keeps the blood pumping. And then all your team members are all the little body parts around. And so if they need to know what their essential role is, and help them discover what their natural gifting is, so that they can continue to connect that to the heart. And that is how I think a beautiful culture continues to cultivate and thrive. And culture, I discovered, it's not one person. It's everyone that makes up a culture. So it's not Dr. Sarah that is the torchbearer, or me because I have a title in that. It's every single person. And that's something I had to remind myself over and over again when I was trying to navigate this. And I think it's really vital that you just keep pouring into yourself, because that is what anything you input is the output. And so just reminding your team to be taking care of themselves, to be connecting to their giftings in their heart. That is my goal as a leader. And that creates a we mentality and not a me mentality. And with that, I've just seen us be able to make strides forward because we're focusing on the right things.
Absolutely. And I love how you tied it into, we talk a lot about how leadership leaks, but every single person on the team is going to drive and influence the general culture of the office. And so while you can cultivate it or teach upon it and try and instill all these different values or thoughts, it still has to be carried. Like you said, I think about a birthday cake, and you light one candle and someone else lights another candle, and then 3 people are taking those single candles and lighting other candles, and then everyone's kind of taking the pot so that you got all 50 candles on the cake lit and stuff, and so you're all really contributing to this beautiful bright light that is your team. And so growing with leadership and changing and having to evolve through that, which can be uncomfortable, that can lead into having different perspectives about what leadership is, what it means, how to actually have a space for yourself to grow personally, to have a space to hold for others, for them to grow. How has that evolved for you in the way that, is there anything else that you would add to people that are wanting to really level up their leadership and build their leadership skills specifically in their company or role or business?
If I were to give any advice to leaders, it would be to get really clear on your company's culture, your why, everything that you're doing. Because you need to know your own identity, because you don't want others to start defining it for you. That's what we're saying. If you aren't in control of the culture, it's going to breed into something else. So you need to know who you are in order to shape and cultivate a place that you love to show up and love to work at every single day. And then also the people that you have with you, look at them as like they are gifts to you to utilize in all these beautiful ways. And if you're feeling burnout or tired or like leadership's too heavy, then see who is around you, because they're all the people that want to do everything for you to make your business successful. So I just look at them as just like beautiful puzzle pieces that we just need to inspect, get to know, and figure out how they're supposed to add to the business, and not at all think that you have to be doing every single thing and then they're just sort of there on the side. And I think it's just important as a leader to not expect that perfection in your leadership, and just to go ahead and just ditch that, because it doesn't serve you to try to be perfect. I have just learned that so many times at this point, and just know that like the longer that you work too, you're just going to uncover like new and greater giftings inside of you. So it's okay when things like shift and change, because I think that's the best part of my story is I started out as one, like in one specific area, one role. But as I started to uncover more things that I'm like, ooh, I would like this, or I'm really interested in this, it created new roles. And then, and now here I am in this area, and people are serving and doing the things that I was doing that are way better at them than me. But it takes time. And I think a lot of people don't want to like let things change like me, but what happens when you're not letting change just happen, then you're not getting to experience what like the good that's supposed to come from that change. There's always like a reason for it. And so instead of being resistant to it, think like, oh, there's something really awesome on the other side of that. And that is as a leader, you get to have that visionary perspective, and it can seem scary, but there's a lot of trust when something, if it feels too hard, then maybe let it go and see if it comes back, if it's supposed to work out. I think that Dr. Sarah, she's told me that 1,000 times, of like loosening your grip and just letting things flow easily. And I think that freedom has become what it is and what it's going to continue, because we're just learning to like loosen up our grip more and more. So those are some things I would love for people to be able to take in and think about in their own leadership.
Absolutely. And to expand on that, just as we are concluding and wrapping up our interview with you, inviting our audience to really just, if you think about the role that you play in your office, in your business, in your life, in your relationships, like, how are you contributing to a positive culture in that role? Or perhaps are you evaluating where maybe there are areas of improvement within yourself? And if there are areas that resonate with you, what you heard today, and you want us to continue to expand on it, give you some practical tips and tools, please send us a message, reach out to us, send us an email. Everything is linked in our show notes, because we're happy to make sure that you are equipped and feel prepared to do that within your own life. Because truly, again, having a positive team culture and an honoring workplace and being a leader is hard, but that is really, really important to continue to grow and evolve your business. And also that will leak into who you are affecting that walks into your business each day. So Kendyl, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your heart and your story with us, and the ways that you have grown in this area, and for being honest and raw about even the things that you like recognize that you needed help and growth with. So it was, I got to spend time with you while I was also at Freedom, and just remembering the person and what you were doing then as kind of fresh in the team culture to now being an absolute driver of it is really, really cool. So thanks for sharing today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
So if you liked what you heard today, please go ahead and share it with all your friends. Like it, follow us on all platforms where we are streaming. We can't wait to share with you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.